It stretches for over 2,300 kilometers, a vast, vibrant kingdom hidden beneath the waves, larger than the entire country of Italy. This isn't just any patch of ocean. This is the Great Barrier Reef, the largest living structure on Earth. A shimmering spine of color so massive you could see it from space. If you knew where to look between the swirling clouds and sapphire seas of northeast Australia. It doesn't have a flag or a throne, but it's undoubtedly a kingdom, and its subjects, well, they're billions in number, each stranger and more spectacular than the last. To call the Great Barrier Reef alive is not poetic exaggeration. It literally lives and breathes, though not in the way you or I do. Its bones are coral, its veins are ocean currents, and its pulse is the endless dance of marine life. From darting parrotfish to lurking reef sharks. But what's most mind-blowing? This entire metropolis of marine madness is built by creatures the size of an ant's eyelash. Meet the coral polyp, an organism so tiny it could moonlight as a punctuation mark, and yet it is the architect of empires. Each coral polyp is basically a minuscule sea anemone with a talent for construction. They secrete calcium carbonate, a fancy way of saying limestone, and build little cup-like houses for themselves. Think of them as underwater masons, working 24/7 for the last 500,000 years, stacking and layering these homes on top of one another until, boom, you have a reef the size of 70 million football fields. Take that, Rome. But here's where it gets even weirder. Coral polyps don't do this solo. No, they've got roommates. Inside their transparent tissues live microscopic algae called zooxanthellae. Yes, it sounds like a spell from Harry Potter, and it should be. These algae perform photosynthesis and produce food, which the coral happily slurps up. In return, the polyps offer the algae a sunny seaside apartment with prime real estate. It's the ultimate energy-sharing roommate arrangement, part survival, part tropical romance. Now let's zoom out. Because when we say Great Barrier Reef, we're not talking about one continuous stretch of coral like some underwater version of the Great Wall of China. No. This living giant is actually a mosaic of over 2,900 individual reefs and 900 islands, spread across a swath of ocean roughly the size of Japan. If it were a country, the reef would have its own time zone, national anthem, and probably a jellyfish as president. And it's old, really old. Some parts of the reef date back over 500 years, with the current living reef system forming around 8,000 years ago, after the last ice age melted away like forgotten gelato. Over millennia, the coral grew upward, following the rising sea levels, clinging to submerged hills and ridges like ivy on an ancient wall. What we swim through today is the latest chapter in a story that predates pyramids, philosophers, and flat earthers alike. You might wonder how something so delicate, a reef made by squishy, spineless creatures, could withstand the test of time. Well, the secret lies in teamwork and stubbornness. Coral reefs are relentless. They grow in layers, repair damage, adapt to changing conditions, at least they used to, and can bounce back from cyclones and rough tides like a salty old pirate. Their biggest threat, not sharks, not sea snakes, but humans with sunscreen and diesel engines. But before we get to that part, the sad stuff, let's bask in the sheer audacity of nature's design. The Great Barrier Reef isn't just big, it's biodiverse. Like the Vatican of variety, over 9,000 known species call it home, and that's just the ones we've named. Scientists are still discovering new reef residents faster than you can say nudibranch. From turtles with faces like old philosophers to fish that change gender depending on the vibe, this place is Earth's ultimate costume party. Even the water itself behaves differently here. The reef acts as a breakwater, calming waves and currents, creating sheltered lagoons and crystal-clear shallows that shimmer like liquid glass. The sun hits the coral glows, the fish perform synchronized swimming routines, and somewhere a snorkeler screams into their mask because they just spotted a clownfish. Yes, that clownfish. But despite all the beauty, there's a majestic gravity to it all. The reef isn't just a colorful playground. It's an ecosystem on the edge, a sentinel of change, and a barometer for the planet's health. It whispers stories of rising seas and warming waters. It remembers when oceans were colder, cleaner, and less crowded with plastic. And yet it endures, barely, like an ancient library made of light and life. And perhaps that's the greatest secret of the Great Barrier Reef. It's not just a place, it's a process. A never-ending act of creation and destruction, of death and rebirth. performed by the tiniest of creatures in a show older than humanity itself. We call it a reef, but it's more like a living chronicle, a symphony written in limestone, played by sunlight, and conducted by the tides. So the next time someone tells you that nature's miracles are confined to mountains and rainforests, point them east toward the coast of Queensland. Out there, beneath the waves, lies a sleeping giant, still breathing, still building, still stunning us with its silent, sprawling grace. The Great Barrier Reef isn't just the largest living thing on Earth. It might just be the most magical. Beneath the shimmer of turquoise waves, past the swaying forests of seaweed and clouds of darting fish, lies a city more alien than any sci-fi world Hollywood has ever dared to imagine. This isn't Atlantis. It's not made of gold or ruled by mermaids. But what you'll find here is infinitely stranger and infinitely more real. Welcome to the coral cities of the Great Barrier Reef, where alien architects work day and night to build underwater empires using nothing but sunshine, spit, and a whole lot of calcium. Yes, we're talking about coral. The stuff you might think is just colorful underwater rock. Well, surprise. Coral is not a rock. It's not a plant. It's not even one single animal. It's a collective, a superorganism, a teeming, wriggling colony of countless tiny builders called polyps. Each one jelly-like, tentacled, and no bigger than the head of a pin. And together they are the skyscraper engineers of the sea. Picture this, a single coral polyp floating in the ocean, looking for a place to settle. It's like a real estate agent with a very specific taste. It needs the right mix of sunshine, current, and stable ground. And once it finds its dream location, it anchors down and begins the ancient art of reef making. How? By building itself a house out of limestone that it makes from its own body. Let's pause for a moment and appreciate that. This jelly-like creature, with no brain and no backbone, produces calcium carbonate, the same material found in limestone cliffs and seashells, and uses it to craft a tiny cup-shaped home. Then it invites its cousins, its kids, and even complete strangers to join the block. They keep building, stacking their little houses next to each other, until what began as a single squat becomes a sprawling coral colony. Over decades, centuries, and millennia, these colonies stack upon the bones of their ancestors, dead coral becoming the foundation for the new, until they form entire reefs, cathedrals of stone built by squishy things that glow in the dark. And they do glow. Coral polyps are nocturnal, which makes them a bit like the vampires of the ocean, minus the brooding and the biting. By day, they shrink into their limestone homes to avoid sunburn, relatable, and by night, they unfurl their tiny tentacles to catch plankton drifting in the current. Some corals are translucent, others flash neon hues under UV light like they just walked off a rave stage. Scientists still aren't entirely sure why they glow. It might be protection, it might be communication, or maybe coral is just a bit of a show-off. But they don't work alone. These jelly architects have a secret weapon, zooxanthellae, microscopic algae that live inside their tissues and perform photosynthesis, just like plants. In exchange for a cozy home and sunlight access, the algae provide the coral with food, sugars, and oxygen. In fact, most of the coral's energy comes from this internal solar panel. Without their algae, coral would be pale, starving, and very, very dead. So yes, the reef is solar-powered. And no, coral doesn't even have to leave the house for groceries. It's a genius system, really, like Uber Eats meets renewable energy. Now let's turn on the time-lapse camera, because coral doesn't grow fast, at all. Some species grow less than a centimeter per year, that's right. If coral were a construction worker, it would take 50 years to build a curb. But patience, it seems, pays off. Over thousands of years, this slow-motion construction results in reefs that stretch for hundreds of kilometers, thick with towers, tunnels, and balconies for fish, turtles, and crustaceans to call home. It's an entire marine metropolis, each coral colony a building, each species a neighborhood. Some are bustling apartment blocks, while others are solitary villas. And the entire reef? A city that never sleeps or stops growing. But wait, the story gets even weirder. Once a year, usually after a full moon and a very specific rise in temperature, the reef throws a party that makes Mardi Gras look tame. It's called mass spawning, and it is nature's version of synchronized confetti. Coral colonies across the reef release trillions of eggs and sperm into the water at the exact same time, turning the ocean into a swirling, magical soup of life. It's awkward, chaotic, and utterly mesmerizing. Scientists still aren't sure how the coral knows when to let loose, but whatever the signal is, moonlight, water temperature, chemical cues, the entire reef seems to get the memo. Imagine drifting over the reef on this night, with soft currents pulsing, the water thick with floating pink and white specks, like glitter on a black dance floor. Fish hover in confusion, predators cruise in excitement, and the next generation of coral, microscopic and fragile, begins its journey. Some will get eaten, most will never settle, but a few will drift down, find a patch of clean rock, and begin the whole glorious cycle again. Of course, not all coral builds alike. Some grow as branching staghorns like underwater antlers. Others form boulder corals, massive and slow like the wise elders of the reef. Then there are the table corals, flat and wide like dining halls for fish. Each shape serves a purpose, catching light, resisting waves, or providing hideouts from predators. It's not just beautiful, it's architectural genius. These coral cities don't just house marine life, they shape entire ocean currents, buffer coastlines from storms, and even provide oxygen to the atmosphere. And for humans, they offer food, tourism, medicine, and a place to feel humbled. Because standing in front of a living reef, a city built by creatures smaller than a sesame seed, is like staring at a cathedral that builds itself. It's impossible not to feel awe, and yet these alien architects are fragile. A small change in water temperature, a surge in pollution, or an anchor dragging across the seabed can undo centuries of work in seconds. Coral bleaching, the ghostly whitening caused by stressed polyps ejecting their algae roommates, is one of the most heartbreaking sights on Earth. It's like watching a city go dark, building by building as life flickers out. But for now, they endure. Silent, patient, glowing softly beneath the waves. They've survived ice ages, tsunamis, and eons of change. And maybe, just maybe, if we listen closely and protect fiercely, these jelly-like builders will keep building, crafting cities of wonder, one polyp at a time. It hits you before you even dive in. Just beneath the boat, the sea changes shade, from postcard blue to electric turquoise, then into a kaleidoscope of shifting rainbows. And when your mask dips below the surface, it's like falling headfirst into a box of spilled crayons. Welcome to the Great Barrier Reef, the most colorful place on Earth that isn't a kid's birthday party or a paintball disaster. But make no mistake, this isn't just eye candy for scuba tourists. This dazzling display is a high-stakes language. In the reef, color is code. It's camouflage, it's seduction, it's threat, it's magic. In this underwater world, where sound fades and words don't work, survival depends on how well you can broadcast, or hide, your intentions with every shimmer and stripe. So, why is the reef so ridiculously colorful? Let's start with a little science. Sunlight, the very fuel of coral life, behaves differently underwater. As you descend, colors begin to vanish. Red is the first to go, disappearing after just a few meters. Orange and yellow follow. By the time you're 30 meters down, it's like diving in a world painted only in blues and greens. But some creatures have found ways to bend the rules of light. Their bodies reflect, refract, and even create color in ways that would make a rainbow jealous. Take the mandarin fish, for example, a tiny reef dweller no bigger than your thumb, but dressed like a royal attending an intergalactic masquerade ball. Its neon blues, oranges, and greens aren't just for show. They're actually the result of biofluorescence, where special proteins absorb one color of light and emit another. It's like wearing glow-in-the-dark clothes, except you're a fish, trying to flirt. And flirt they do. In fact, color in the reef is often a full-on dating profile. Many fish change colors during mating season, flashing their best hues in an underwater version of speed dating. Wrasses become more vibrant. Parrotfish go from dull to disco. Even octopuses get romantic, turning soft pink or creamy white when in the mood. Some species even change gender and then change color, because why not complicate things? But not all colors scream, "Pick me." Some whisper, "You don't see me." In a reef packed with hungry mouths and lurking jaws, camouflage is king. And here, nature gets seriously clever. Enter the stonefish, a venomous grump with a face only a marine biologist could love. It looks exactly like a rock. Not kind of, not almost, exactly. So convincing, in fact, that people have stepped on them thinking they were pebbles and lived to deeply regret it. Stonefish blend into coral crevices and rubble-strewn floors, waiting motionless for an unlucky prey to swim too close. Then, snap, the world's fastest strike. One moment you're admiring the seafloor, the next a rock just ate a fish. Then there's the leafy scorpionfish, swaying like a bit of seaweed, complete with mock veins and frilly edges. Or the flounder, which uses specialized skin cells to mimic the texture, not just the color of sand. These creatures are walking, or rather swimming, optical illusions. But the masters of disguise? The cephalopods, specifically the octopus. These 8-armed escape artists don't just change color. They morph shape, texture, and even posture. One second it's a coral-encrusted rock, the next it's a patch of sand, and the next, a snarling predator with eye spots, raised arms, and a dramatic flair that would make a Broadway actor jealous. How do they do it? Magic? Almost. Octopuses have chromatophores, tiny pigment sacs controlled by muscle contractions. Like an orchestra of living pixels, they can open and close these sacs at will, layering pigments and creating dynamic skin patterns in milliseconds. Combine that with papillae, muscular skin bumps, and they can add 3D texture to the illusion. They don't just blend in, they become the background. But not everyone in the reef wants to hide. Some go the opposite direction, turning their bodies into neon signs that scream "back off." Bright colors often mean danger in the natural world, and the reef is full of bold warnings. The blue-ringed octopus flashes glowing electric rings when threatened, and with venom that can kill a human in minutes, you'd be wise to heed the message. The lionfish drapes its venomous spines in elegant stripes, looking like a floating punk rock ballerina, and the nudibranch, a squishy sea slug with no shell or defense, struts around in psychedelic patterns, advertising that it's toxic and not worth the trouble. But here's the twist. Some reef animals are liars. Color mimics that pretend to be poisonous when they're not. Fish that wear colors of more dangerous cousins, hoping predators will mistake them for something nastier. The reef is not just a war of claws and teeth, it's psychological warfare, and color is the weapon. And then there's the invisibility trick. Some reef creatures have evolved transparent bodies, like glass shrimp, who are almost completely see-through, floating like ghosts among anemone tentacles. Others, like squid, use a built-in light show to cancel out their own shadows using bioluminescence, essentially making themselves invisible from below. Colors here don't just protect, they communicate. Schooling fish use flashes of silver to coordinate movement. Cleaner wrasses advertise their services with specific color patterns, inviting bigger fish in for a spa treatment. An odd trust exercise considering one is a snack-sized fish massaging the jaws of a predator. In this world, a stripe can mean clean me, a spot can mean go away, and a flash can mean follow me. It's a living language without sound, an endless conversation painted in light. Even corals themselves get in on the color game. Many fluoresce in greens, reds, and purples, especially at night. Some scientists think it helps regulate sunlight. Others believe it might attract helpful algae or ward off harmful rays. Or maybe coral just likes to look fabulous after dark. But this color paradise comes with a warning. When corals are stressed by heat, pollution, or rising acidity, they eject their algae roommates, lose their color, and turn ghostly white. This coral bleaching is not just sad, it's deadly. Without their colorful algae, corals starve. The reef loses its glow, its life, and its ability to shelter the creatures that depend on it. So yes, the reef is stunning. It's a riot of color. But those colors are more than decoration. They're stories, warnings, love notes, threats, lies, life. Down here, in this silent underwater metropolis, color is currency. Every splash of pigment is a strategy. Every glow is a gamble. And every creature, from the invisible shrimp to the kaleidoscopic parrotfish, is playing the game of survival, one brilliant hue at a time. So the next time you peer into a tide pool or drift above a coral garden, remember, those colors aren't just pretty. They're powerful. They might just be the reason anyone is still alive. The Great Barrier Reef. Glowing, peaceful, serene. Or so it seems. Beneath the shimmering blues and coral cathedrals lies a world not unlike a neon-lit jungle. Beautiful, Absolutely, but also brutal, because down here, paradise has teeth. This is predator playground and the rules are simple: eat or be eaten. We tend to think of coral reefs as gentle places, swimming with friendly fish, soft anemones and lazy turtles. But let's be clear, the reef is a full-blown buffet and every creature is either serving or being served. The food chain here doesn't tiptoe, it lunges. And in this underwater kingdom, the apex predators aren't lions or wolves. They come with fins, fangs, and the kind of eyes that never blink. First up, the undisputed celebrity of the reef's carnivore caste, the shark. Now, not all sharks are towering great whites with a soundtrack of doom playing behind them. In fact, most of the sharks in the Great Barrier Reef are far more elegant than terrifying. Meet the blacktip reef shark, sleek, fast, and always dressed like it's heading to a secret agent party with its signature dark-tipped fins. It cruises the shallows with casual confidence, like it owns the joint, which, to be fair, it kind of does. Then there's the white-tip reef shark, the night shift predator. While other fish sleep in the coral's nooks, these slinky hunters slither through caves and crevices, slipping their long, eel-like bodies into impossible spaces. Their style? Silent, surgical, and very rude if you're a snoozing parrotfish. They don't charge in like bulls. They thread the maze and strike with precision. But for a more dramatic flair, let's bring in the grey reef shark. Fast, twitchy, and not above a good chase. These guys can sense a wounded fish from over a kilometer away, thanks to the ampullae of Lorenzini, special electroreceptors that pick up on tiny electric fields produced by muscle movement. Translation: if your heart is beating, they know. Sharks may be the rock stars of reef predators, but they're not the only ones with an appetite and an attitude. Enter the barracuda, the reef's very own torpedo with teeth. With bodies built for speed and eyes that stare like they've seen some things, barracudas are ambush predators with a flair for drama. They hover silently, motionless in the water, then explode forward at up to 40 km/h in a silvery blur of fury. Their weapon of choice? A mouthful of knives, and they don't bother chewing. Why waste time when you can swallow chunks whole? And now let's talk about one of the reef's most underestimated and most lethal residents, the stonefish. If the ocean ever wanted to prank someone, it invented the stonefish. Ugly, warty, and completely indistinguishable from a rock, this creature is the reef's master of hide and seek. You won't even know it's there until it's too late. It doesn't chase prey. Oh no, it waits, motionless, patient. A predator Zen master. When an unlucky fish swims a little too close, it launches one of the fastest strikes in the animal kingdom, gulping its victim in just 0.015 seconds. Blink and you miss it, literally. But it gets better, or worse depending on your perspective. The stonefish isn't just a stealth assassin, it's also venomous, not mildly uncomfortable venom. We're talking intense, scream into the void, possibly fatal if untreated venom. Its dorsal spines are like hypodermic needles tipped with agony. Step on one and you'll remember the experience for the rest of your life, if you're lucky. So how do all these apex predators coexist in such a tightly packed, neon-lit neighborhood without constant turf wars? Here's where the reef gets clever. The Great Barrier Reef is not just a hunting ground, it's an ecosystem engineered for balance. It's crowded, yes, but also structured. Like a multi-layered apartment block, different species occupy different floors. Some stalk the open water above the reef. Others cruise along the edges. And many, like moray eels, stake their claim deep in the coral's hidden tunnels. Everyone's got their niche, their hunting schedule, their personal dining preferences. And like any well-run city, the reef runs on recycling and efficiency. Leftovers don't go to waste. When a predator makes a kill, there's a whole cast of scavengers waiting to clean up the mess. Cleaner wrasses, crabs and opportunistic fish who hang back just far enough to avoid becoming dessert. Even reef sharks tolerate these little freeloaders. No one wants bloodstains on the coral after all. But here's the most mind-bending part. Predators are essential to the health of the reef. Without them, everything falls apart. Apex predators keep herbivore populations in check. Herbivores, like surgeonfish and rabbitfish, keep algae from smothering the coral. Coral provides shelter for fish. Fish provide food for predators, and round it goes. Remove just one link and the whole chain snaps. This delicate dance even has a name, trophic cascade. When removing a predator sends shockwaves through the ecosystem. On land, it's what happened when wolves were taken out of Yellowstone. In the reef, it's what happens when shark populations drop. Everything else starts to unravel. The coral overgrows, the fish scatter, the balance collapses. So despite their fierce reputations, these predators aren't villains. They're guardians, regulators, necessary nightmares in a dreamlike world. Even their hunting methods are diverse. Some are solitary assassins, others hunt in teams. Reef sharks have been observed herding schools of fish, cutting off escape routes like underwater sheepdogs. Groupers team up with eels, yes, you read that right, to flush prey from hiding spots. And octopuses have been caught collaborating with fish, no joke. One species of octopus even punches a fish when it gets out of line. It's not just the food chain, it's a soap opera. So next time you see a reef predator gliding silently over the coral, don't just admire its power, appreciate its role. These sleek shadows and fang-filled faces are more than just muscle and menace. They're the reef's regulators, ensuring that no species grows too dominant, no patch of coral gets overrun, and the whole wild orchestra keeps playing in perfect harmony. In the predator playground, there are no padded swings or safety mats, but there is order, there is rhythm, and strangely enough, there is peace. It's a peace maintained not by the absence of danger, but by its very presence. Forget what you think you know about sea creatures. Yes, clownfish are cute. Yes, turtles are graceful. And yes, sharks are cool in that slightly terrifying, I run this town kind of way. But today we're pulling back the curtain on the real showstoppers of the Great Barrier Reef, the ones that never make it onto tourist brochures or Pixar movies. These are the creatures that seem like they were dreamed up by a sci-fi writer during a fever dream. They glow, they punch, they walk. Some even look like they were designed by someone who'd never actually seen a fish and just guessed. Welcome to the alien underworld of the reef, a place where the bizarre isn't the exception, it's the rule. First up, a creature that sounds like a medical condition but looks like it's ready to strut a Paris runway, the nudibranch. Technically, it's a type of sea slug, but don't let that dull name fool you. Nudibranchs are walking color explosions. Electric blues, flaming oranges, candy pinks, sometimes all at once. These flamboyant little critters look like someone gave a kindergarten class free rein with neon markers and said, draw a banana peel with antennae. But this fashion comes with function. Those vibrant colors, they're not just for show, they're warnings. Nudibranchs don't run from predators, they practically dare them. You want to eat me? Fine, but you'll regret it. Many species are toxic, storing poisons from the food they eat, like sponges or even jellyfish stingers, in their squishy bodies. It's like eating something spicy, storing the burn, and then using it as your defense mechanism. Genius, gross, effective. And if you're wondering, yes, they're hermaphrodites. Yes, they sometimes mate by fencing with their reproductive organs. And no, we have absolutely no idea how they managed to make that look elegant. If Marvel had a crustacean superhero or supervillain, it would be the mantis shrimp. Despite the name, it's not a shrimp, and it's definitely not mantis-level chill. This little guy is pure rage in a technicolor shell. Let's talk about its vision first. Humans have 3 color receptors in our eyes. Mantis shrimp, they've got 16. They can see ultraviolet, polarized light, and even detect cancer cells, not kidding. We look at the reef and see beauty. They see radioactive art, secret messages and emotions, probably. But the real showstopper? The claws. Oh, those claws. Mantis shrimp come in 2 varieties, spearers and smashers. Smashers are the ones to fear. They've evolved club-like appendages that punch so fast, 50 miles per hour underwater, they create cavitation bubbles, which generate heat comparable to the surface of the sun and deliver a secondary shockwave. In simpler terms, they punch so hard they boil water and cause light. They can crack aquarium glass, obliterate snail shells, and probably hold a black belt in shrimp judo. Luckily, they're only about the size of your hand. But if they were bigger, we'd all be living on land for a reason. Next, let's fly into the fantasy realm with the blue sea dragon, which again sounds like a Game of Thrones side character, but is very real, very weird, and very small. Like you could mistake it for ocean lint small. These creatures drift through the water like tiny aquatic fairies. Their bodies are silver on one side, blue on the other. Perfect camouflage both above and below. But don't let the delicate design fool you. The blue sea dragon is a stone-cold killer. It feeds on Portuguese man-o'-war, those floating jellyfish that ruin beach days and can leave painful stings on unsuspecting swimmers. The sea dragon consumes its venomous tentacles, stores the toxic stingers inside its own body, and uses them for its own defense. It's like eating a grenade and turning into a walking weapon. Oh, and they float upside down. Because of course they do. Now let's go truly absurd. Picture a shark. Got it? Sleek, fast, slicing through water like a torpedo. Now erase that. Replace it with a small spotted shark that walks on its fins, across coral, at night. Meet the epaulette shark, aka the reef's most adorable rebel. Native to shallow reefs, this pint-sized predator evolved in a place where the tide goes out, trapping fish in tidal pools. So instead of getting stranded, the epaulette shark decided to get moving, developing modified fins it uses like limbs to push itself along the seabed. It's not fast, it's not graceful, but it gets the job done. Even cooler, it can survive low oxygen levels for hours, shutting down non-essential organs and waiting out the dry spells like a sea monk in meditation. It's one of the few sharks that has mastered the art of not drowning on land. Respect. Now you might be wondering, what do all these oddballs actually do for the reef? Aside from starring in niche documentaries and inspiring memes, well, a lot. These creatures play vital roles. Mantis shrimp controls snail populations. Nudibranchs prevent sponge overgrowth. Walking sharks keep shallow pools clean of rotting fish. And the blue sea dragon? It keeps jellyfish numbers in check. The weirdos are the unsung maintenance crew of the reef. The janitors, the bouncers, the backup dancers. They remind us that evolution doesn't follow a script. It experiments. It improvises. It says, what happens if we give a shrimp laser vision? Or, what if we make a slug look like tie-dye spaghetti? The reef is a living laboratory, and these bizarre beings are the breakthrough results. So the next time you're snorkeling over the coral gardens, don't just look for the flashy fish or the majestic turtles. Look closer. Look under ledges, in cracks, in tide pools. That blur of color might be a nudibranch. That rock with eyes could be a mantis shrimp. That tiny floating ribbon, a sea dragon in disguise. Because in the Great Barrier Reef, the true magic isn't just in the familiar, it's in the fantastically strange. Love, loyalty, companionship. You might think those are concepts reserved for swans, penguins, and the occasional overly attached golden retriever. But dive into the Great Barrier Reef, and you'll discover that some of the most loyal couples, cleverest partnerships, and strangest romances happen underwater. And not between dolphins reciting poetry. No, we're talking about alliances so intimate, so bizarre, and so beautifully codependent that they make human dating look like a clumsy experiment. This is the world of symbiosis, where two very different creatures team up for survival. Sometimes it's mutual love, sometimes it's freeloading, and sometimes it's just good business. But in the ever-chaotic chaos of the reef, these odd couples are getting it right. Let's start with the celebrity relationship of the reef, the clownfish and the sea anemone. Yes, the duo that found its way into our hearts and Pixar films, but trust me, this relationship goes far deeper than children's cinema. Sea anemones might look like harmless underwater flowers waving gently in the current, but don't be fooled. They're carnivorous death carpets, armed with venomous tentacles capable of paralyzing fish that wander too close. Most creatures avoid them like a jellyfish in a swimming pool, except for the clownfish. Through a combination of mucus, immunity, and sheer nerve, clownfish are immune to anemone stings. And so, they make their homes right in the middle of this floating minefield, snuggling between the tentacles like it's a cozy beanbag chair, all the while being protected from predators who don't dare go near. But the clownfish doesn't just freeload. It's the ultimate roommate. It cleans the anemone, chases off unwanted guests, and even feeds it by luring prey close. In return, the anemone provides shelter, protection, and the kind of real estate most reef fish would kill for. They don't just tolerate each other, they depend on each other. It's a love story forged not in flowers and chocolates, but in toxins and fish poop. Romance, reef style. Next up, we move to one of the most fascinating service industries in the ocean, the cleaning stations. No, not for submarines or coral, for fish. Enter the cleaner wrasser, a tiny hyperactive fish that's basically the reef's overbooked esthetician. These little guys set up shop at specific locations on the reef, coral spas, if you will, and offer their services to any fish in need of a scrub. And yes, business is booming. Big, scary predators like groupers, moray eels, and even sharks will line up like polite customers at a spa, open their mouths and gills, and allow the wrasse to swim inside, picking off parasites, dead skin, and leftover food like a pro. It's an awkward, intimate moment, like if your dentist also flossed your tonsils, but it works. The cleaner wrasser gets a steady diet of snacks and is rarely eaten. Why? Because killing your therapist is bad etiquette, even in the ocean. Some predators will even let multiple wrasses into their mouths at once, remaining completely still while they get the full deluxe treatment. It's one of the few times you'll see a shark smile, and the trust, unshakable. There are videos of predators offering their throats to these tiny fish like, "Go ahead, take your time." It's equal parts adorable and wildly dangerous looking. Now let's get weird, really weird. Deep in the sandy floors of the reef lives a pair that proves that cohabitation with clear boundaries might be the secret to happiness. Meet the watchman goby and the pistol shrimp, a mismatched duo with opposite skill sets and zero chance of survival without each other. The shrimp is nearly blind but a brilliant digger. The goby is terrible at digging but has excellent vision. So here's the deal. The shrimp builds and maintains the burrow, creating a luxurious sand and shell home for two. The goby stands guard, sitting at the entrance like a security guard on caffeine, constantly scanning for danger. When the shrimp wants to leave or do repairs, it keeps one antenna in contact with the goby's tail. If the goby flicks its fin, predator alert. The shrimp instantly retreats. They move in sync like an old married couple, barely needing words. And yes, they sleep side by side in the same burrow. No prenup required. Then there's the boxer crab, an odd little crustacean with a flair for accessorizing and an unusual definition of self-defense. Instead of growing claws or building armor, this crab carries two tiny anemones in its front claws like pom-poms. When threatened, it waves them around like an angry cheerleader, stingers at the ready. It's cute. It's absurd. It works. In return, the anemones get food scraps from the crab's meals and constant transportation to prime dining locations. It's like Uber Eats, but the driver has boxing gloves. If one anemone is lost, the crab will literally split the remaining one in two, creating a clone. Congratulations! You've just watched a crab practice agriculture, cloning, and armed defense, all while looking like it's about to do a halftime show. And finally, let's talk about one of the strangest relationships in the ocean, and probably the most awkward. The pearlfish, a thin, slippery eel-like fish, has an unfortunate housing preference. It likes to live inside the anus of sea cucumbers. Yes, you read that correctly. During the day, the pearlfish sneaks into the cucumber's posterior, hiding safely within its soft, tubular body. At night, it swims out to feed, then returns to its, rear-facing apartment. Now, this isn't always mutual. Some sea cucumbers may be unaware or just tolerating the situation. Others get used to their guests. It's not exactly love. More like a bad roommate situation that no one's brave enough to end. But it's still symbiosis. A reminder that in the reef, survival doesn't always look graceful. Sometimes it's just about finding shelter, wherever you can. These underwater relationships are more than quirky trivia. They are survival strategies honed over millions of years. In a world where everything wants to eat or be eaten, cooperation becomes a superpower. Whether it's sharing shelter, swapping services, or simply agreeing not to eat your roommate, symbiosis keeps the reef running like a well-oiled, oddly romantic machine. So next time someone tells you true love is hard to find, tell them about the shrimp and the goby, or the clownfish that feeds its anemone, or the shark that patiently waits for a tiny wrasse to clean its gums. Because in the wild, unpredictable dance of reef life, loyalty isn't rare, it's required. As the golden sun sinks below the horizon, painting the waves in fiery oranges and soft lavender, a quiet hush falls over the Great Barrier Reef. The day shift, the flashy parrotfish, the darting damselfish, the graceful reef sharks, begin to slow, retreating into coral crevices and algae beds, like office workers clocking out. The reef, it seems, is winding down. The underwater city falls still. But don't be fooled. This world is far from asleep. Because just like in the neon glow of Vegas or the back streets of Bangkok, when the lights go out on the reef, the real party animals come out. And they are weird, wonderful, and way more active than you'd think. Welcome to the nightlife of the reef, a completely transformed ecosystem where new creatures emerge, familiar ones act strangely, and the water comes alive with bioluminescent whispers. Nightfall on the reef isn't just a dimmer switch, it's a full system reboot. The entire community changes shifts in a matter of minutes. Diurnal fish find hiding spots, burrowing into sand or tucking themselves between coral branches. Some, like the parrotfish, go full home security mode, secreting a protective mucus bubble to mask their scent and confuse predators. That's right, fish snot sleeping bags. Evolution, folks. Then the nocturnal crew clock in. Out from the shadows glides the moray eel, slinking between coral heads like a velvet ribbon with teeth. During the day, these serpentine predators hide in holes, peering out with an expression best described as judging silently. But at night, it's game time. They hunt with a second set of jaws. Yes, you heard that right. Morays have pharyngeal jaws tucked inside their throats that shoot forward to grip prey and pull it down. Imagine having a backup mouth that helps you eat. Creepy? Very. Effective? Also yes. As darkness settles, a softer kind of magic begins. The sea starts to glow. Not from lights above, but from the tiniest performers of all, bioluminescent plankton. These microscopic creatures light up when disturbed, twinkling in electric blues and greens as if the ocean itself is blushing. A wave of your hand, the kick of a fin, or the brush of a passing fish can trigger a burst of underwater stars. It's like swimming through a galaxy that breathes. This glow serves several purposes: to attract mates, confuse predators, or just show off. Some plankton even light up when swallowed, making the predator itself a glowing beacon, like a burglar triggering their own alarm. Nature loves irony, and they're not alone. Some jellyfish, squid, and deep-sea fish join the light show, wielding chemical light like living lanterns. While most bioluminescent wonders prefer the deeper ocean, even the reef has its fair share of twinklers, flickering quietly through the night currents. One of the reef's most elegant night dwellers is the cuttlefish, a close cousin of the octopus, with a flair for fashion and a gift for illusions. These marine magicians can change their skin color and texture in milliseconds, creating rippling patterns that mimic coral, sand, or even flashing lights. At night, they stalk the reef like silent UFOs, hovering with undulating arms, hypnotizing prey with waves of color before striking with a pair of stealthy tentacles. They are thinkers too, with some of the largest brains relative to body size in the invertebrate world. Observing a cuttlefish is like watching a master chess player glide silently through a laser show. And if there's ever a time for cuttlefish drama, it's night. Mating, hunting, rivalries, all play out in glowing camouflage and elegant swirls. It's the reef's version of a masked ball, only everyone's actually a squid. Of course, not everyone is hunting or glowing. Some creatures are just trying to get some shut-eye. And watching them do it is both oddly adorable and entirely fascinating. Take sea turtles, for example. These ancient mariners find caves or ledges to rest under, anchoring themselves with their flippers to avoid drifting off with the tide. You might find one wedged peacefully under a coral arch, looking like a retired samurai monk in meditation. Their heart rate's slow, their bodies still, and they enter a state of deep rest, only needing to surface every hour or so for a breath. It's the reptile version of power napping. Reef fish have their own bedtime rituals too. Some wedge themselves into rock crevices. Others hover motionless in the water column, looking eerily lifeless, until a hungry predator gets too close. Then it's surprise. I'm not dead, just sleeping. Meanwhile, octopuses retreat into dens and seal the entrance with rocks and shells, the closest thing the reef has to locking the front door. Some have even been observed changing colors in their sleep, as if they're dreaming in technicolor. What does an octopus dream of? Theories range from crab buffets to cosmic revelations. Either way, it's pretty magical. The reef at night is a predator's playground, and not just for the eels and cuttlefish. Crabs emerge in droves, turning the seafloor into a bustling crustacean crawl. Some are scavengers cleaning up the leftovers of the day shift. Others are ambush predators with blades for claws and no sense of personal space. Then there are lobsters, who roam the reef in lines, looking like armored janitors with an agenda. And don't forget the nocturnal sea stars, slow-moving, silent hunters that trap unsuspecting mollusks and digest them in the most polite, invisible way possible, externally. For the smaller residents, juvenile fish, tiny shrimp, unlucky plankton, it's a game of hide and seek with very, very high stakes. You see, the reef doesn't just sleep, it transforms. The day and night cycles on the reef are as dramatic as sunrise on the Serengeti. Different creatures, different behaviors. Even the chemistry of the water changes slightly. It's a second world layered beneath the first. A reminder that the reef is not just colorful, but complex beyond comprehension. Night is when the reef resets. Predators control populations. Cleaners recycle the remains. Lights flicker in the dark. And the entire system balances itself in shadow. It's quieter, stranger, more secretive, but no less alive. So the next time you're floating above the reef under the stars, don't just think of it as a place that sleeps. Think of it as a city with two faces, one that shines in daylight and one that whispers in the dark. And in that darkness, hidden in coral crevices and glowing waves, are creatures living out stories just as thrilling as any daytime spectacle. Because in the Great Barrier Reef, the night doesn't silence life, it unleashes it. The Great Barrier Reef, Earth's largest living structure, its underwater kingdom, its kaleidoscope of life, is breathtaking. But now, something else is taking its breath away. What once glowed in shades of neon, violet corals, golden fish, jade blue anemones, is in some places fading to bone-white silence. The symphony of the reef is being muted, slowly, tragically, and very visibly. This is not just a story of beauty. This is the story of a battle, a living wonder facing its most formidable enemy yet, us. Let's start with one of the most haunting sights in the marine world, coral bleaching. Sounds harmless, like laundry day gone wrong, but don't let the name fool you. Bleaching is corals' scream for help. Corals, remember, are not rocks.
They're colonies of tiny animals, polyps, that rely on a microscopic partner, zooxanthellae, algae that live inside their tissues and give them color, nutrients, and energy through photosynthesis.
It's a partnership forged over millions of years, a marriage of light and life. But like any relationship, it has its limits. When the water gets too hot, even by just 1 or 2 degrees, this fragile partnership begins to unravel. The algae, stressed by the heat, start producing toxins. In desperation, the coral expels them. And with the algae gone, the coral turns ghostly white, not dead yet, but starving. It's as if the reef holds its breath, waiting for conditions to improve. Sometimes, if the heat wave passes quickly, the algae return. The coral recovers, the marriage is patched up. But if the heat continues for weeks or months, the coral begins to die. Here's the thing, the ocean is warming, fast. Since the 1980s, the frequency and intensity of marine heat waves have increased dramatically. The Great Barrier Reef has endured 5 mass bleaching events since 1998, with the most devastating in 2016 and 2017, when up to 50% of shallow water corals in the northern reef died. Whole stretches, once bursting with life, were reduced to pale skeletons. The culprit? Climate change. Greenhouse gases, pumped into the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels, trap heat. Most of that heat, over 90% of it, is absorbed by the ocean. And the result is a slow, relentless cooking of the planet's most vital ecosystems. Imagine living in a house where the thermostat is broken and rising steadily, 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees above normal. There's no escape, no fan, no window to open. That's what the corals are facing, and it's not just heat. Warmer waters also lead to stronger cyclones, more acidification, and shifts in ocean currents, all of which pile onto the stress already crushing the reef. While temperature grabs the headlines, another enemy slinks in under the radar: pollution. Runoff from agriculture, containing fertilizers, pesticides, and sediments, flows from rivers into the ocean like a toxic cocktail. This clouds the water, smothers coral, and feeds algal blooms that outcompete and overwhelm delicate reef life. Add to that plastic pollution, which clogs the reef's arteries, entangles wildlife, and introduces microplastics into the food chain. And suddenly, this underwater Eden starts to resemble a junkyard. And let's not forget crown-of-thorns starfish, coral-eating monsters whose outbreaks are supercharged by nutrient pollution. A single starfish can eat 6 square meters of coral a year. Now multiply that by hundreds of thousands. It's a buffet, and the reef is the main course. There's another less visible villain in this drama: ocean acidification. As carbon dioxide levels rise in the atmosphere, more of it dissolves into the ocean. This changes the chemistry of seawater, lowering its pH and making it more acidic. Corals need carbonate ions to build their skeletons, but acidification strips those ions away, making it harder for corals to grow and easier for them to crumble. It's like trying to build a castle out of wet sand. No matter how skilled the architect, the foundation just won't hold. But this isn't just a story of loss. It's a story of resistance, innovation, and hope, led by scientists, indigenous communities, conservationists, and ordinary people who refuse to give up. In laboratories across Australia and the world, researchers are developing super corals, heat-resistant strains bred or selected for survival in warmer waters. Think of them as the climate change commandos of the reef. Elsewhere, coral nurseries are being grown underwater, where fragments are cultivated, then transplanted to damaged areas. Scientists dive with zip ties and glue guns, literally piecing the reef back together like underwater surgeons. Some even deploy robots. Yes, robots, like Larvalbot, which swims over bleached reefs, dispersing baby coral larvae like underwater pixie dust. Then there's the work of traditional owners, indigenous Australians who have cared for the reef for thousands of years. Their deep knowledge, stories, and connection to the reef offer insights that modern science is only beginning to understand. Many now partner with marine researchers, bridging ancient wisdom with cutting-edge conservation. But the truth is, we can't save the reef only from beneath the waves. The real battle is on land, in boardrooms, on ballots, and at breakfast tables. Because every decision we make, from what we drive to what we eat to how we power our homes, has ripple effects in the ocean. The reef doesn't just need marine biologists. It needs all of us. It needs citizens who demand bold climate policies, tourists who travel responsibly, farmers who use smarter practices, schools that teach the next generation to love and protect the sea. This isn't someone else's problem. The reef is our problem, and also our treasure. The million-dollar question. The truth? We don't know. Some parts of the reef have shown incredible resilience, bouncing back from bleaching and stress. Others may never recover.
But we do know this: if we act boldly, globally, and now, we can give the reef a fighting chance. It's not too late, but it's close. The Great Barrier Reef isn't just a victim, it's a warning sign, flashing in fluorescent colors, a living system gasping for air, showing us in real time what unchecked warming, pollution, and apathy can do. But it's also a symbol of hope, of nature's strength, of science's creativity, and of humanity's potential to protect what truly matters. Because if we can't save the Great Barrier Reef, one of the most iconic, beloved, and studied ecosystems on Earth, what hope do we have for the rest of the planet? So as you gaze out over that turquoise horizon, or dive beneath into the coral gardens, remember, this place is not guaranteed, it's not permanent, it's a gift. And right now, that gift is in our hands. If the Great Barrier Reef is a cathedral built by coral and lit by sunlight, then somewhere, deep in its watery aisles, are the people who have sworn to protect it, even as the world tries to tear it down. They come in all forms: scuba tanks strapped tight, clipboards in hand, boats bobbing on the horizon, or sometimes barefoot, standing under gum trees whispering ancient stories that stretch back before the reef itself was born. These are the reef defenders, the unsung, salt-soaked heroes who fight every single day to keep the reef alive. Let's start with the marine scientists, part adventurer, part academic, and all in on saving the reef. They're not your typical lab dwellers. They spend as much time underwater as they do in front of a microscope. They're divers, data junkies, and sunburned optimists who think it's totally normal to count fish in 40 degrees Celsius heat while dodging jellyfish. Some spend years tracking coral colonies, measuring growth rates by the millimeter. Others analyze water chemistry, watch for temperature spikes, or tag turtles like marine paparazzi. But beyond the clipboards and coral samples, they're dreamers with one foot in reality and one in the future. And sometimes they dream big. How big? Coral IVF big. When corals spawn, that magical moment when millions release eggs and sperm into the water in a synchronized moonlit frenzy, scientists are ready. With nets, with buckets, with the kind of focus usually reserved for bomb squads. They collect the spawn, mix it carefully in lab-controlled tanks, and raise the larvae in baby coral nurseries. This is coral IVF, and yes, it's exactly as intimate and bizarre as it sounds. Once the coral babies grow strong enough, they're transplanted back onto the reef, onto damaged patches, bleached sections, or dead zones. It's restoration, reef-style, like replanting a rainforest one polyp at a time. Some scientists even freeze coral sperm in cryogenic banks, creating a coral gene vault, in case the wild reef doesn't make it, and we have to start again. Jurassic Park, but with less dinosaurs and more plankton. But the reef isn't just protected by labs and scuba tanks. Long before Western science arrived with charts and graphs, indigenous Australians were already looking after the reef, guided by stories, songlines, and ancestral knowledge stretching back tens of thousands of years. These are the traditional owners of the reef, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who belong to this land and sea, spiritually and practically. For them, the reef isn't just a habitat, it's a relative, a living being, a sacred entity with its own laws and stories. Now, many of them work as sea country rangers, blending ancient wisdom with modern conservation. They patrol coastlines, monitor turtle nests, rescue injured marine life, and educate the next generation, passing on knowledge like threads in a woven net, stretching across generations and salt water. Their insights have helped scientists better understand seasonal cycles, coral spawning cues, fish migrations, and the deep cultural importance of protecting life under the waves. It's a collaboration that's not just wise, it's essential. Of course, science doesn't stop at sperm banks. This is the 21st century, and the reef now has robots. Yes, robots. Welcome to the age of the underwater caretakers. One of the most famous is Larvalbot, a small torpedo-shaped drone designed to swim above the reef and deliver coral larvae like an underwater crop duster. It cruises silently, planting new life over bleached and damaged zones, all without disturbing the reef's delicate balance. It's part of a larger movement called reef restoration technology, and it includes everything from underwater AI cameras that monitor fish populations to drones that identify outbreaks of coral-eating starfish. And while none of these machines wear capes or speak in heroic catchphrases, their silent work may one day tip the scales for the reef's survival. Not all heroes wear wetsuits, some wear flip-flops and carry GoPros. Every year, thousands of volunteers join conservation groups to help clean beaches, remove plastic, survey marine life, and assist with reef restoration. Some are trained divers who monitor coral health during dives, submitting their data to global databases. Others are school kids planting mangroves to reduce runoff. Then there are citizen scientists, everyday people who help track coral bleaching, report pollution, and even contribute to coral counting apps. One photo, one sighting, one snorkel trip, it all adds up. The message is simple. You don't have to be Jacques Cousteau to save the reef. You just have to care. There's also a growing army of organizations battling to save the reef, often with names that sound like they belong in a superhero comic book. Great Barrier Reef Foundation, funding cutting-edge science and community projects. Australian Marine Conservation Society, fighting for stronger laws and protecting endangered species. Reef Restoration Foundation, growing coral nurseries on steel frames underwater. Tangaroa Blue, organizing massive beach cleanups and data tracking for marine debris. Some fight in courtrooms, pushing for climate action and better reef policies. Others work in schools, businesses, and governments, trying to spark change from the inside out. Together they form a kind of reef resistance, a network of hope, action, and stubborn optimism. And then there are the storytellers. Filmmakers, photographers, writers, and educators who use their voices to bring the reef to people who may never dip a toe in the ocean. They capture its beauty, they explain its peril, they inspire action, not with fear, but with awe. Because sometimes, saving something starts with loving it. Let's be honest, the fight to save the reef is monumental. There are no guarantees. The threats are real, rising, and ruthless. But beneath the waves, in the labs, in classrooms, and on sun-scorched beaches, people are choosing to act, to build, to repair, to believe. And belief is a powerful thing. The Great Barrier Reef doesn't need superheroes. It needs humans who refuse to quit, who plant corals,
who protect turtles, who fight for laws, who tell stories. Because every action ripples outward, like a wave, like a current, like life itself. And in the end, maybe that's the most powerful force of all. The Great Barrier Reef doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention with thunder or earthquakes. It doesn't stamp its feet or shake the earth. It simply exists, glowing, breathing, shimmering beneath the waves like a dream woven from light and limestone. And yet, as the world turns hotter, louder, faster, the reef is whispering something. A warning, a question. Will I survive you? We've taken you through coral cathedrals and creature kingdoms, into glow-in-the-dark waters and secret fishy love stories. We've met punching shrimp, glowing plankton, and turtles that nap beneath the stars. But as this journey ends, we must face a truth that's harder to swallow than seawater in a snorkel. The Great Barrier Reef is in trouble. Mass coral bleaching, rising sea temperatures, ocean acidification, plastic pollution, overfishing, coastal development, crown of thorns starfish, shipping accidents, and yes, the looming monster in the room, climate change. This is not a distant threat. It's happening now. Reefs that once pulsed with life are now graveyards of pale skeletons. Species are disappearing before we even get the chance to name them. And for the first time in history, one of the planet's oldest, most complex ecosystems may vanish. Not from natural disaster, but from human choice. That's the kicker, isn't it? It's not just happening to the reef, we're doing it. So now we turn the camera on us. Not on the coral, not on the clownfish, on the species at the very top of the food chain. The species that has the tools, the knowledge, and the power to act, or to ignore, to change course, or to shrug. Will the reef survive us? That depends. Not on governments alone, not on marine scientists or conservation groups, though they're fighting like hell. It depends on every single one of us. Because the choices we make each day, how we travel, what we consume, what we vote for, what we support, ripple across the world, even into these distant coral gardens. Our cities might feel far from the reef, but our carbon footprints walk right across it. Our silence allows destruction. Our action can spark rebirth. But here's where the tide begins to shift, not just with doom, but with hope. Because the reef is not going down without a fight. Coral scientists are breeding supercorals. Robots are planting new life. Indigenous rangers are restoring old traditions. Divers are rebuilding the reef with their own hands. Students are cleaning beaches. Politicians, the good ones, are pushing for real climate policies. The reef is resilient, stubbornly so. It's been here for 500,000 years. It has survived ice ages, cyclones, and shifting continents. It's seen the rise and fall of dinosaurs, empires, and now, possibly, us. Given the chance, it will bounce back. We've seen coral return after mass bleaching. We've seen fish flourish in protected areas. We've seen dead zones come back to life. Nature doesn't need us to fix it. It just needs us to stop breaking it. It's not too late. But it is now or never. Imagine this, a child 50 years from now, flipping through a virtual reality tour of Earth's lost wonders. There's the Amazon, half gone. There's the polar bears in memory. And there's the Great Barrier Reef, no longer glowing, no longer living. Just an archive of photos and old documentaries narrated by people who remember it. Did it really look like that? The child might ask. Was it really that colorful? Why didn't anyone stop it from dying? Now imagine answering that question and not having a good answer. But that doesn't have to be our legacy. We can still choose something better. We are the first generation to truly understand the damage we're doing. We may be the last with a chance to stop it. Let that sink in. Let that haunt you. Let it move you. Because this reef, this vast, living, breathing masterpiece, is more than just a natural wonder. It's a test, a mirror, a measure of our maturity as a species. Can we act not for profit, but for posterity? Can we protect what we cannot replace? Can we choose harmony over harm? Because if we save the reef, if we can rally enough will, technology, and compassion to preserve something this fragile and complex, then we can save anything. So here we are, the end of our journey. You've seen the colors, the creatures, the chaos, and the calm. And now, You must decide what role you'll play. Will you be a visitor, a bystander, or will you be one of the defenders? Because the reef doesn't need more spectators. It needs guardians, storytellers, voters, volunteers, donors, dreamers, you. Yes, you, watching this screen, holding this moment. You can help decide if the reef survives. So let us leave you with one last dive. Through coral cathedrals teeming with life, beneath sunbeams filtered by turquoise waves, a turtle glides past. A manta ray flaps like a shadow from another world. A clownfish peeks from its anemone. Tiny plankton sparkle in your wake. It's not a fantasy. It's not a simulation. It's real, but only as long as we choose to protect it. The Great Barrier Reef is more than coral. It's more than fish. It's more than Australia. It's a story, and that story is not over yet.